I did not argue when Graham texted me on the night of December 23rd telling me I was cooking for 25 people. I did not cry. I simply stood in the kitchen and tapped book for a one-way flight to Savannah. He thinks I am putting on an apron to serve his investors, but he is wrong. I am not reacting. I am documenting. They want a brunch service, but I am preparing a permanent departure. My name is Brielle Hartman. I am 33 years old, and I investigate internal compliance failures for a living. I know how to spot when a system is rigged, and I know exactly when a paper trail is being forged to cover a liability. It was 11 o'clock at night on the 23rd of December. The house was silent, the kind of expensive silence that usually costs a fortune in insulation. My phone buzzed against the quartz island, the vibration sounding harsh against the stone. It was a message from Graham. "You cook Christmas brunch for 25 people." The text read, devoid of any question mark. I have promised it already. I stood in the center of a kitchen that looked more like a showroom than a home, staring at the device. He had not even bothered to call. He had simply assigned the task. A second message followed immediately, a bulleted list of dishes that would require at least 12 hours of prep work. Make sure the ham is honey glazed, and Brielle, please do not burn the quiche like last time. I felt a cold sensation spread through my chest. It was not anger. It was recognition. This was not a request from a husband. This was a work order from a manager who did not respect his employee. Then the family group chat lit up. Lorraine? Of course. My mother-in-law was awake and monitoring the situation. Remember to do it the traditional Caldwell way. Her message popped up, the text bold on the screen. Don't make a mess. And certainly don't embarrass us with your experiments. I could hear her voice in my head, that condescending lilt she used whenever she reminded me that I had married into a tax bracket I did not belong to. I was about to lock the screen when Graham added one final instruction in the private chat. It is a huge honor for you to host these people. Brielle. But listen, wear something simple. Maybe the black slack suit. The guests are very upscale. We want you to blend in, blend in. He did not want a hostess. He wanted a server who slept in his bed. I set the phone down. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not throw the expensive heavy-bottomed glass into the sink. I simply walked over to the fridge, poured a glass of water, and took a sip. Then I picked the phone back up and opened the airline app. I did not look at flights to Paris or Rome. I typed in Savannah, Georgia. My thumb hovered over the date. Departure tomorrow, the 24th of December. Time 12:15 in the afternoon. Ticket type one way. The price was high for a last-minute booking, almost $800. But I did not care. I selected the flight before I hit purchase. I minimized the app and opened my personal cloud drive. I tapped the plus sign, create new folder. I typed the name in all caps receipts. I navigated to the security settings, enabling two-factor authentication and removing Graham's recovery email from the account. This was standard operating procedure in my line of work. When you discover a security breach, you lock down the data. I opened our shared calendar, the one synced to the smart home hub on the wall. I tapped on the entry for tomorrow, Christmas brunch. I expanded the details, scrolling past the guest list. There, hidden in the notes field, was the truth. Investor briefing equity partners, post-meal presentation. He was selling me. He was selling my labor, my home, and my holiday to close a deal. I switched back to the airline app. My finger tapped book. The screen loaded for a second, then flashed the word confirmed. My pulse did not race. My hands were steady. I walked out of the kitchen and up the stairs to the master bedroom. I sat at my vanity. In the mirror, I looked the same as I had 5 minutes ago, but the woman staring back was no longer a wife. I reached for my left hand. The diamond was heavy, a rock that served as a shackle. I slid it off, feeling the resistance of the knuckle, and then the sudden release. I placed it inside my velvet jewelry box. I took the small brass key, inserted it into the lock, and turned it until it clicked. I had not left the house yet. My suitcase was not packed, but the role was finished at North Pine Integrity Systems, where I spend my days as a senior compliance investigator. We have a saying, the fraud is never in the numbers. The fraud is in who controls the spreadsheet. I am 33 years old, and my entire career is built on the premise that people lie. But audit logs do not. I do not trust promises. I trust timestamps. I trust authorization codes. I trust the question of who approved what and when. Yet, sitting in the dark of my bedroom with a packed suitcase, I realized I had committed the cardinal sin of my profession. I had failed to audit my own life. The signals had been there, flashing red like a dashboard warning light I had chosen to ignore. It started 6 months ago. Graham stopped inviting me to his company galas. It is just boring shop talk. Brielle, he had said, smoothing his tie in the mirror, avoiding my eyes. You would be miserable. Stay here. Relax. Then came the digital isolation. One morning, the password to our shared cloud account was changed. When I asked, he claimed it was a mandatory security update and he would set it up on my phone later. He never did. Then came the soft ban on social media. He told me that his partners valued privacy, that posting photos of our vacations made me look unserious to his high net worth network. I complied. I always complied. Lorraine was no better. My mother-in-law never treated me like a wife Graham had fallen in love with. She treated me like a candidate who had passed a rigorous background check. You are suitable, she once told me over tea, her voice devoid of warmth. You are efficient. That is what this family needs. We do not need drama. We need management. I had thought she was complimenting my competence. I was wrong. She was describing my job description. Graham had become wealthy very quickly in the last 2 years. His equity firm, Evercliff, seemed to explode with capital overnight. But for a man who managed millions, he was aggressively lazy about his own life. He hated logistics, so I took it over. I managed the bills, the maintenance schedules, the travel bookings, and the insurance policies. I told myself this was partnership. I told myself that while he hunted, I built the fortress. Now, looking at the empty space on my finger where my ring used to be, I saw the architecture of the trap. It was not a partnership. It was a system. He kept the assets. I kept the liabilities. He generated the wealth. I generated the labor required to maintain the image of that wealth. The most damning piece of data occurred only last week. I had been down with a severe flu, running a fever of 102 degrees. I was curled up in bed, shivering, barely lucid, when Graham came in. He was dressed for work, smelling of expensive cedarwood cologne and impatience. He sat on the edge of the bed and placed a stack of documents on the nightstand. Babe, I hate to bother you when you are like this, he had said, his voice dropping to that sweet, solicitous register that used to make me melt. But the accountant needs these tax forms signed. Today, it is just standard filing. He handed me a pen. I tried to sit up, reaching for my glasses to read the fine print. No, don't strain yourself, he said, his hand gently pushing the paper down, covering the header text. Just sign at the tabs. I checked it all. You trust me. Right. I remembered looking at him. His eyes were not on me. They were flicking to the Rolex on his wrist. His hand, when it brushed mine to guide the pen, was freezing cold. I should read it, I had mumbled, my voice raspy. Brielle, please, he snapped, a crack in the mask before smoothing it over instantly. I am late. Do not be difficult. It is just taxes. I signed 3 times. I closed my eyes in the dark room. That was the moment. That was the breach. I had violated my own protocol. I had signed a document without reviewing the chain of custody. There are many ways to end a marriage. Some end with a lipstick stain on a collar. Some end with a shouting match. But some wars do not begin with a betrayal of the heart. They begin with a reclassification of status. Graham and Lorraine did not see me as a family member anymore. To them, I had been demoted. I was no longer a partner. I was an asset to be leveraged, a liability to be managed. And tomorrow, I was scheduled to be the catering staff. But they forgot one thing about compliance officers. We always go back and check the file. The sun was just rising over the manicured hedges of Briar Glen, South Carolina. When I pulled my car into the circular driveway of the Caldwell estate, it was the morning of December 24th. The house looked less like a home and more like a fortress built to intimidate people who bought their clothes off the rack. I walked into the kitchen through the service entrance, as instructed. Lorraine was already there, inspecting a row of copper pots that she claimed were heirlooms but looked suspiciously unused. She did not say hello. She simply shoved a clipboard into my chest. "Here is the inventory," she said, her eyes scanning my face for flaws. "We have investors coming from Charleston. Do not make anything pungent. I do not want the guests' eyes watering because of your enthusiastic seasoning and Brielle. Try to smile less. You look manic when you try too hard." I took the clipboard. "Understood. Lorraine." From the adjoining great room, I heard Graham's voice booming. He was on speakerphone, likely performing for the early arrivals or his partners. "Oh, you do not need to worry about the food," Graham was saying, his voice thick with false pride. "My wife is back there now. She is a wizard. Seriously, she lives to serve. It is her thing." I froze. Lives to serve. I moved further into the kitchen and stopped. The room was already full of people. There were 4 men in crisp white uniforms unpacking crates of high-end catering supplies. They were professional chefs. If they had hired a full staff, why was I here? Then I saw the schedule pinned to the corkboard. The professionals were handling the main course and the wine. My name was listed under a specific column, Atmosphere Creation, Homemade Touch. I was not the chef. I was a prop. I was there to crack eggs in front of rich people to make the house feel authentic. "Excuse me." A sharp voice cut through the noise. I turned. A woman stood in the doorway. She was wearing a blood-red dress that cost more than my first car, and she held a champagne flute at 8 in the morning. I recognized her immediately. Tessa Wynn, Graham's senior partner and the woman whose name appeared on half the invoices I had found. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my plain sweater. "Graham," she called out, not looking away from me. "Is this the cook you mentioned, the one with the quaint recipes?" Graham appeared behind her, holding a tumbler of scotch. He looked at me, then at Tessa. He did not introduce me as his wife. He did not correct her. He laughed. A nervous, hollow sound. She is handling the stove today. Yes. Brielle, say hello to Tessa. Charmed, Tessa said, stepping past me as if I were a piece of furniture. She dropped an empty napkin on the counter right in front of me. Make sure the quiche is not soggy. I hate a wet crust. I looked down at the counter where she had been standing. A printed email lay there, half covered by a tray of silver. It was a strategy memo from Evercliff Capital. I slid it closer. Objective investor confidence. Tactic humanize the leadership. Action Brielle to execute brunch service to demonstrate family brand warmth and domestic stability. I felt a hand snatch my phone from the pocket of my apron. I spun around. Lorraine was holding my device, dropping it into a crystal bowl on the high shelf. You are distracted, Lorraine said, dusting off her hands. No phones in the kitchen. We need you. Focused. You can have it back when the guests leave. My hand twitched. I wanted to snatch it back. I wanted to scream that I was a senior compliance officer, not a scullery maid. But I stopped. Screaming would make me the hysterical wife they wanted to portray. Silence made me a witness. You are right, Lorraine, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering a rhythm of pure rage against my ribs. I should just get to work. I picked up the knife. I looked at the onions. I did not cry. I simply filed away the image of Tessa's red dress, Graham's cowardice, and the specific wording of that memo. Humiliation does not kill you. Lack of evidence does. And I was just getting started. I wiped my hands on a paper towel, keeping my breathing even. I turned to Lorraine, who was currently rearranging the fruit platter for the third time. Lorraine, I need more butter, I said, injecting just enough frantic energy into my voice to sound like a stressed housewife. The recipe calls for unsalted European style. We only have salted. She didn't even look up. Go. Hurry back. The guests arrive in 40 minutes. I walked out the side door, my shoes clicking against the pavement. The moment the heavy oak door latched behind me, I dropped the act. I did not run. Running looks suspicious. I walked briskly to my car, unlocked it, and popped the trunk. Underneath the spare tire well, where Graham never looked because he refused to change a flat, was my backpack, passport, laptop, hard drive. I got into the driver's seat. I did not turn toward the grocery store. I merged onto the highway and headed straight for the airport. Behind me, the Caldwell kitchen was a stage set for a play that had just lost its lead actress. It was a trap that was currently sitting open, waiting for a victim who was already doing 65 miles per hour in the opposite direction. My phone mounted on the dashboard lit up. It was Graham. I watched the screen pulse. I did not answer. I pressed the side buttons and took a screenshot. Timestamp 10:25 in the morning. He called again. Screenshot 10:26. He texted, "Where are you, Mom is freaking out. Pick up." I screenshotted the text. I was not ignoring him. I was building a log. At a red light near the terminal, I opened my email app. I composed a message to myself. Subject departure. Body left at 10:30 in the morning. They volunteered me. I did not consent to this labor or this event. I hit send. That was my affidavit. I pulled into the long-term parking garage, finding a spot on level 4. I shut off the engine. The silence in the car was heavy. I opened a hotel booking app on my phone, not the one linked to our joint rewards account, but a separate travel app I had used before we were married. I booked a room in Savannah for 3 nights. The rate was $240 a night. I used a credit card solely in my name. One Graham didn't know existed. If he checked our joint statements, he would see nothing but silence. Security took 20 minutes. By the time I was sitting at the gate, they would be realizing the butter was taking a very long time. I boarded the plane and took my seat in row 12. As the other passengers shoved carry-ons into the overhead bins, I opened the shared calendar on my phone one last time before enabling flight mode. I scrolled down to the investor briefing entry scheduled for after the brunch. I expanded the attendee list. There was a name I hadn't noticed before. Arthur P. Vance, General Counsel. My stomach tightened. You do not bring a corporate lawyer to a casual holiday brunch unless you are planning to execute a contract. I opened my encrypted messaging app and found Miles Arden. Miles was the best forensic accountant I knew. A man who could find a hidden asset in a haystack of shell companies. Miles, I typed, I need you to pull everything. I think I am being set up as a liability shield. I am in the air. I stared out the window as the engines began to whine. I closed my eyes and visualized the steps ahead. This was not a dramatic exit. There would be no screaming matches on the lawn. My plan had a name. No scene, just chain of custody. The plane accelerated down the runway. As the wheels left the ground, I did not feel the relief of escape. I felt the cold, hard focus of a professional walking into an interrogation room. I was not flying away from my life. I was flying toward the evidence. The hotel room in Savannah was beige and smelled faintly of industrial lemon cleaner. I sat at the small desk, my laptop humming as I connected to the secure virtual private network. I was no longer a wife wondering why her husband was distant. I was an auditor conducting a forensic review of a failing partnership. I pulled up the joint checking account first. I sorted the transaction history by vendor, my eyes scanning the lines until they stopped on a wire transfer dated 3 days ago. $50,000, I whispered to the empty room, the number feeling heavy on my tongue. You paid? $50,000 to Win Meridian Consulting. Win. As in, Tessa Win. It was not a business expense. It was a transfer of marital assets to a shell company controlled by his mistress. I tried to access the settings for the credit card linked to that account to freeze it, but the login failed. A red banner flashed across the screen stating that a password reset link had been sent to the recovery email. I checked the recovery email on file. It was no longer my personal Gmail account. It was Graham's corporate address at Evercliff. He had executed a financial choke, cutting off my access to our own liquidity before I even knew I was under siege. I navigated to the folder labeled Signed Documents in our family digital archive. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I found the file named Tax Filing Supplemental 2025.pdf. The timestamp matched the night I had the flu, the night Graham had sat on the edge of the bed and guided my shaking hand to the signature tab. I opened it. It was not a tax form. A post-nuptial agreement, I said, my voice trembling with cold rage. You made me sign. A waiver of spousal support. While I had a fever of 102, the document stipulated that in the event of a separation, I waived all claims to the Briar Glen estate and any future earnings of Evercliff Capital. He had tricked me into signing away my future while pretending to care for my health, but I needed to know the endgame. I logged into the shared family utility email account we used for bills and subscriptions. Most people forget to scrub the drafts folder. Graham was most people. There was one draft, subject line Plan B. I opened it. It was a bulleted list, likely written by a lawyer and pasted here for Graham to memorize. If she refuses to cook, document outburst. Frame as mental instability. Call police for wellness check. File for emergency protective order based on erratic behavior. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hotel air conditioning. They wanted me to scream. They wanted me to throw the ham on the floor so they could paint me as dangerous and lock me out of the house I legally owned half of. I pulled up the calendar and cross-referenced it with the credit card statements I had downloaded earlier. It was a perfect regression line of betrayal. Every time Graham had a late board meeting, there was a charge for a dinner for two at a steakhouse or a spa booking at a resort 40 miles away. It was not random. It was systemic. Then I searched public records for my own name. A new entry popped up, filed just 48 hours ago. Hartman Event Solutions, LLC, registered agent Brielle Hartman. I never created this, I said, staring at the screen. They had forged my digital signature to open a limited liability company. Why then it hit me. If 25 investors got food poisoning or if the house caught fire during the brunch, the liability would not fall on Graham or the Caldwell estate. It would fall on this shell company standing in my name. I was the designated fall guy for any catastrophe they were planning. My phone buzzed. It was Miles. Brielle, I got into the metadata of the drive, Miles said, his voice crisp through the speaker. That file titled Brunch Seating and Rolls. It was modified 2 hours before it was sent to you. Who modified it? I asked. Author tag is T. Win. Miles replied. She assigned you to the kitchen. But here's the kicker. 5 minutes later, the file was opened and saved by G. Caldwell. He didn't just see it, Brielle. He approved it. I hung up the phone. I looked at the wall. The brunch was not a party. It was a stage. I was the prop, the free labor, and the liability shield, all wrapped in an apron, and my husband had clicked save on my destruction without a second thought. I met Dana Rourke in a glass-walled conference room in downtown Savannah. She was a woman who specialized in high-asset divorces and reputation defense, the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to scorch the earth but leave the building standing. She reviewed my folder of screenshots, the metadata logs Miles had pulled, and the forged LLC documents. She did not look shocked. She looked like a surgeon inspecting an interesting tumor. Here are the rules of engagement, Dana said, sliding a retainer agreement across the mahogany table. No direct contact, none. You do not answer his calls. You do not reply to his texts. You do not go home to pick up a toothbrush. Everything goes through me. Can you handle that I am a compliance officer? I replied, uncapping my pen. I follow protocol. I am used to discipline. Good, Dana said, her eyes narrowing. Because they will try to provoke you. They want a reaction they can screenshot. We are going to give them silence. By noon on the 24th of December, we had filed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order on all marital assets. Simultaneously, Dana issued a litigation hold letter to Evercliff Capital Partners. This was a legal demand requiring Graham and his firm to preserve all data emails, Slack messages, calendar edits, and server logs relevant to our marriage and my finances. It was the legal equivalent of locking the doors and turning on the lights. Graham did not take it well. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my work phone buzzed. It was the Director of Human Resources at North Pine Integrity Systems. My stomach dropped. Graham knew that my job was my lifeline, my identity. Brielle, we received a formal complaint regarding your conduct, the director said, her voice professional but strained. An external party has alleged that you are using North Pine proprietary forensic tools to stalk a private citizen. They claim you are abusing your position to harass your husband. I felt the blood drain from my face. He was trying to get me fired. He was trying to cut off my income so I could not afford to fight him. I have not used company tools, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I used public records and my own personal devices. I can prove it. I immediately forwarded the complaint email to Miles. Trace it. I texted him. I need the header information. Now. 10 minutes later. Miles called. He is sloppy. Brielle, Miles said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his tone. The email to your HR department was sent from a generic Gmail account. Sure. But the originating IP address, it resolves to the guest Wi-Fi network at Evercliff Capital Partners. He sent it from his office, probably while he was pacing around, wondering why you were not cooking his ham. I forwarded the trace report to my HR director. It was irrefutable proof that the complaint was a bad faith attack launched from my husband's place of business. The result was immediate. North Pine did not fire me. They placed me on paid administrative leave pending an internal review, effectively freezing my status and protecting me from further interference. Graham's attempt to destroy my career had just guaranteed me a fully paid war chest to fight him. Dana read the update and sat back in her chair, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. Do you see what they are doing? She asked, tapping the table with a manicured fingernail. They are trying to paint you as unstable, paranoid, and abusive. They want a narrative where you are the villain so they can justify the post-nuptial agreement. She looked me dead in the eye. We are going to flip the script, she said. They are framing you as unstable. We will frame them as fabricators. Every lie they tell is a gift. Brielle, let them talk. I looked down at my phone. Graham had texted 6 times in the last hour. The tone had shifted from anger to panic. He was realizing that the quiet wife who managed his calendar had just locked down his world. I do not want an apology, Dana, I said, closing the folder. I do not want him to say he is sorry. I want him to make mistakes. I want him to put so many lies on the record that when we walk into court, he suffocates. I did not need them to feel guilty. I needed them to be sloppy. And they were complying perfectly. I received the message at 4:30 in the afternoon on Christmas Eve. My phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number, displaying a local area code. I am the guy who set up the kitchen rentals, the text read. I have video. You need to see this. I did not reply immediately. I forwarded the screenshot to Dana and Miles. In my line of work, you do not walk into blind meetings without a safety net. Dana set the protocol. I would meet the source in a public coffee shop 2 blocks from the hotel. She would be on an open line through my earbuds, recording the conversation. Miles would be monitoring my location in real time to ensure the chain of custody for any evidence I collected remained unbroken. I walked into the cafe at 5:15. It was nearly empty, the holiday lull settling over the city. A young man sat in the corner booth, drumming his fingers on the table. He looked barely 22, wearing a black hoodie and the tired expression of someone who works in the service industry during the holidays. This was Noah. I sat down across from him. I did not smile. "You said you have video," I said, keeping my voice low. Noah looked around, checking the empty tables. "Look, I don't want trouble, but I saw how they talked about you when you weren't there. It was messed up. They treated you like a ghost." He pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. I was running a time-lapse on my phone to document the equipment setup for my portfolio. Noah explained, "I left it propped up on the microwave for an hour. I caught everything." He pressed play. On the screen, the Caldwell kitchen appeared in fast forward. I saw workers moving crates. Then, the frame slowed down as Noah adjusted the playback speed. Tessa Wynn walked into the frame. She was holding a large laminated chart. She taped it to the refrigerator. I leaned in, squinting at the pixels. The chart was titled Brunch Roles and Hierarchy. Under the column Host, it listed Graham Caldwell and Lorraine Caldwell. Under the column Kitchen Help, Service, it listed one name, Brielle Hartman. The video continued. Graham walked into the shot. He stood next to Tessa, looking at the chart. He did not rip it down. He did not argue. He pointed at my name under Kitchen Help, threw his head back, and laughed. It was a comfortable, complicit laugh. Then Lorraine entered. She was carrying a bundle of fabric. She shook it out, revealing an apron. It was not a normal apron. It was customized. Even on the small screen, the embroidery was legible Caldwell holiday staff. "They had that made custom," Noah said, shaking his head. "That takes a week to order. They planned this way back. But the worst part was yet to come." "Wait," I said, my hand instinctively touching the screen. "Pause it there." In the video, a man in a suit, one of the catering managers, handed Graham a clipboard. The document header was visible: liability assignment and food safety responsibility. Usually, the host or the catering company signs this, accepting legal responsibility if a guest gets sick or injured. Graham took the pen. He did not sign his own name. He pointed to the kitchen help designation, said something to the manager, and then signed. "Zoom in," I commanded. Noah pinched the screen. The signature was sloppy, but the intent was clear. Graham had signed the liability waiver, but he had checked the box assigning full oversight to the designated kitchen lead. He had assigned the legal risk to me. Dana's voice cut sharply through my earbud. "Brielle, do you see that is not just humiliation? That is legal entrapment." I sat back, feeling a cold sweat prickle on the back of my neck. "If someone gets salmonella," I whispered, "or if a burner starts a fire, it is on me. I am the liable party of record." "Exactly," Dana said, her voice turning hard. "They set up an LLC in your name and assigned you the safety oversight. If that brunch goes wrong, they sue you. You lose your savings, your license, everything." Graham walks away clean. I looked at Noah. He looked terrified by the intensity of my reaction. "Can you send me this file?" I asked. "I will pay you for your time. Just take it," Noah said, pushing the tablet slightly toward me. "I don't want money. I hate bullies." I watched the frozen image of my husband signing my name to a potential lawsuit. I had thought they just wanted to make me a servant. I was wrong. They were building a containment wall for their own risks, and I was the brick they were using to plug the hole. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in the hotel room as night settled over Savannah. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. My room service dinner sat untouched on the desk. I was no longer a wife wondering why her husband was distant. I was feeding on something else entirely: data. Miles Arden was on the video call, his face illuminated by multiple monitors in his home office. "Brielle, stop looking at the brunch expenses," Miles said, his voice tinny through the laptop speakers. That is just the tip of the iceberg. I found the main vein. He sent a secure link to the chat window. It was the website for a local nonprofit organization called the Briar Glen Community Table. It was a holiday charity that Evercliff Capital had partnered with for tax write-offs. "Go to the governance page," Miles instructed. "Look at the advisory board." I scrolled down. My breath hitched. There, listed right below the board of directors, was a section titled Volunteer Advisory Council. And there, in black and white text, was my name, Brielle Hartman, Volunteer Compliance Advisor. I never agreed to this," I said, my voice shaking. "I have never attended a meeting. I have never seen their bylaws." "Keep scrolling," Miles said. I pulled their public tax filings. "Look at the consulting fees." I opened the PDF. The numbers were aggressive. In the last fiscal quarter alone, the charity had paid out over $150,000 in strategic consulting fees to 3 different vendors. I ran a quick search on the vendor names. "They are ghosts," I whispered. "These vendors, they don't exist. The addresses are all post office boxes in strip malls." "Exactly," Miles said. "Graham is funneling Evercliff's operating costs through the charity to get the tax deduction, and then paying it out to shell companies he likely controls. It is money laundering. Brielle, plain and simple." Then he dropped the hammer. Miles shared his screen to show me a fragment of a recovered document, an internal memo from Evercliff's server that had been carelessly backed up to a shared drive. Subject: audit preparation. Note: in the event of a regulatory inquiry regarding vendor allocation, assign oversight approval to B. Hartman per her advisory role. I sat back in the stiff hotel chair, feeling the blood drain from my extremities. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The brunch was not just about making me a servant. The volunteer compliance advisor title was not an honor. They were setting me up. "They aren't just stealing money," I said, realizing the cruelty of the architecture. "They are building a fall guy. If the Internal Revenue Service audits this charity..." Graham pleads ignorance. He points to the compliance advisor, me, and says I approved it all. I called Dana immediately. I put her on speaker so Miles could hear. "Do not sign anything," Dana said, her tone lethal after I explained the situation. "Graham is going to offer you a settlement, a big one. If you sign a non-disclosure agreement and take that money, and then the federal investigation starts, the government will view that settlement as hush money. You will look like a co-conspirator who was paid off to keep quiet." "So I can't leave quietly." I said. "No," Dana replied. "You have to scream, but you have to scream on paper." I spent the next 2 hours doing what I did best. I did not use the stolen metadata Miles had found, as that would be inadmissible in court. Instead, I used my memory and the public website listing as the foundation. I drafted a formal whistleblower report. I wrote with cold precision. To the Independent Audit Committee. My name is listed on your website as a compliance advisor. I formally state that I did not consent to this role. I have never reviewed a single financial document, and I have reason to believe my identity is being used to mask irregular vendor payments. I attached the public tax forms, circling the suspicious payments to the post office boxes. I hovered my mouse over the send button. I thought about Graham. I thought about how he had looked at me when I was sick. Guiding my hand to sign the post-nuptial agreement, he thought he was brilliant. He thought he could use his wife as a shield to protect his empire from the fire he had started. "He wants a shield," I said aloud to the empty room. "I will give him a mirror." I clicked send. The email went out to the charity's board, the state attorney general's office, and the fraud department of the bank handling the charity's accounts. The audit wouldn't just be a headache. It would be a forensic dissection of his entire life, and it would start tomorrow morning, right around the time he was serving the honey-glazed ham. The screen of my phone lit up again at 11 o'clock at night. It was Graham. The arrogance of the morning had dissolved into digital desperation. "Brielle, please come back immediately." The text read, "It is all a misunderstanding. Christmas is for family. We can fix this." I did not reply. I did not feel a pull at my heartstrings. I simply took a screenshot, uploaded it to the secure folder, and watched the timestamp settle into the log. An hour later, an email arrived from Evercliff's legal team. It was a settlement offer, forwarded by Dana. They were offering me the Briar Glen house, fully paid off, plus a lump sum of $500,000. But the attachment was thick, a 20-page non-disclosure agreement that was less of a contract and more of a gag order. It required me to withdraw all reports, destroy all copies of any proprietary data, and agree that any mention of the charity or the liability assignment would result in immediate clawback of funds. "They are scared," Dana said when I called her. "This is not a settlement. This is panic wrapped in money." "Set up a mediation call," I told her. "Tonight. Tell them I am wavering. Tell them I am emotional." "You want Tessa there?" Dana asked, knowing my playbook by now. "I want everyone there." I replied. We convened via a secure video conference link at midnight. I sat in the dim hotel room, wearing the same clothes I had traveled in, looking tired and defeated. On the screen, Graham looked frantic, pacing his study. Tessa Wynne was seated next to him, looking annoyed that her Christmas Eve was being interrupted by a runaway wife. "We just want to resolve this amicably," Graham said, his voice tight. "Brielle, you are overreacting to a simple party planning mix-up." I looked down at my hands, feigning hesitation. "I just need to know one thing before I sign," I said, letting my voice tremble slightly. "The kitchen roll, the apron, the liability form. Was it an accident, or did you plan to make me the help?" Graham opened his mouth to lie, likely to offer some soothing platitude about how they just wanted my special touch. But Tessa cut him off. She was tired, she was arrogant, and she despised having her intelligence questioned. "Oh, honestly, Brielle," Tessa snapped, rolling her eyes. "Do not be naive. Yes, it was a plan. We needed to manage optics. Investors want to see domestic stability, not a wife who thinks she is a partner. It was a strategic narrative choice." The silence that followed was heavy. Graham looked at Tessa with horror. He knew what she had just done. She had admitted that the humiliation was premeditated and corporate in nature. I did not smile. I did not point out that Dana was witnessing this. "I see," I said softly. "Thank you for clarifying. I ended the call. I did not need a recording of that admission to win. I just needed them to feel confident enough to go to sleep. I needed them to think I was broken so they wouldn't see the real threat coming." While they were drafting the final version of the non-disclosure agreement, my other screen pinged. The independent audit committee had responded. Because of the six-figure sums involved and the high-profile nature of the charity, they had flagged the account for immediate freeze and review. I picked up my phone and called the process server Dana had hired in Briar Glen. "Is the package ready?" I asked. "Printed and ready to serve," the server replied. "Deliver it tomorrow at 11 o'clock in the morning," I instructed, "right when the brunch service begins." The package contained a preservation order for all data related to the charity and a formal demand for the physical vendor invoices. It was a legal grenade pin, pulled and ready to drop right next to the honey-glazed ham. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the lights of Savannah. Graham thought I had booked a one-way ticket to run away. He thought I was hiding. He was wrong. In a controlled demolition, you do not stand inside the building you are about to bring down. You stand at a safe distance to watch it fall. I had not flown to Savannah to escape. I had flown here to ensure that when the trap snapped shut tomorrow morning, I was outside the blast zone. The one-way ticket was not a retreat. It was the ultimate alibi. The sun rose over Briar Glen on the 25th of December, casting a deceptive golden light over the Caldwell estate. From the back seat of a tinted sedan parked just outside the perimeter wall, I watched the driveway fill with luxury cars. Graham was standing on the front porch, holding a crystal glass, playing the role of the benevolent patriarch. I could hear his voice carrying over the crisp morning air, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Oh, yes, come in, come in," Graham boomed, clapping a partner on the back. "You are in for a treat. My wife has been up since 4 in the morning. She is preparing a brunch that well, it will blow your mind." He led them inside. I checked my watch. It was exactly 11 o'clock. Inside that kitchen, there was no honey-glazed ham. There was no quiche. There was only a cold stainless steel counter and a single object I had asked Noah to leave there, the embroidered apron that read, "Caldwell Holiday Staff." My phone began to vibrate. It was Lorraine. She called once, twice, 3 times. She was likely standing in the empty kitchen, staring at the raw ingredients that had not touched a pan, realizing that her traditional Christmas was dead on arrival. I did not answer. I simply typed 3 words and hit send. "Check your email. Now." At that exact moment, the digital trap snapped shut. Miles had timed the server notifications perfectly. The alert hit the board of directors for the charity first notice of independent audit initiated by whistleblower report. Simultaneously, Evercliff's legal department received the preservation order, and the bank freezing the vendor accounts sent its automated notification to Graham's phone. I watched through the iron bars of the gate as a nondescript gray sedan pulled into the driveway behind a Bentley. A man in a cheap suit stepped out. It was not a guest. It was the process server. He walked past the confused valet and rang the doorbell. When the door opened, the sound of polite holiday chatter was silenced by the loud, formal voice of the server. "Mr. Graham Caldwell, I am serving you with an emergency asset freeze and a demand for production of documents regarding the liability assignment of Brielle Hartman." The guests, who were already whispering about the lack of food and the strange apron hanging like a ghost in the kitchen, went silent. Tessa Wynne pushed her way to the front, her face pale. She tried to salvage the narrative. She just ran away," Tessa shouted, her voice shrill and desperate. "She is unstable. She left us in the lurch." But the narrative did not stick. Noah had already uploaded the time-lapse video to the secure portal shared with the board. The image of them laughing while assigning me the role of liability shield was already circulating in the inboxes of the very investors standing in that hallway. Graham pushed past the server, his face a mask of pure panic. He looked at his phone, then at the gate. He saw my car. He ran down the driveway, still holding his champagne glass, looking like a man whose world was dissolving into liquid. He stopped at the locked gate, breathless, his eyes wild. "Brielle," he shouted, gripping the iron bars. "Brielle, we can fix this. It is just a misunderstanding. Do not do this to the family." I rolled down the window. The air was cold, but I felt warm. I looked him in the eye. "I did not scream. I did not cry. You volunteered me like an object," I said, my voice calm and final. "I am returning you as a case file." I rolled the window up. As the taxi pulled away, my phone pinged with a message from Dana. "Judge just reviewed the medical logs from the week of the flu. The post-nuptial agreement is declared invalid due to duress and incapacitation. The asset freeze is in full effect. You are free. Brielle." I looked back one last time, asked. Graham was still standing at the gate, shrinking into the distance, trapped in the cage of his own making. I turned forward. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Where to?" "Ma'am, the airport," I said. I opened the airline app and looked at the new ticket. One way. But this time, I wasn't flying to hide in a hotel room to build a defense. I was flying to a new city, under my own name, with half the assets and all of the truth. No one would ever edit my role again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below, sharing your city or country. It is amazing to see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people.